Hello, it's June 23rd, 2022, and this is the weekly Backdrop Developer Meeting. We get together every week to cover mostly technical topics that the Backdrop project is facing. And so today we've got a little group here. My name is Nate Lampton. I'm from Oakland, California, and I go by Quick Sketch on the internet. We'll get an intro from Tim and then Jen.
My name is Tim Erickson. I am St. Paul Tim on the internet, and I am in Deerwood, Minnesota. And that's it.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Jen, and then Joseph.
Jen Lampton, joining from Oakland, California, currently working on updates to the event site, and I hope to have a release for Google Analytics today, too.
Great. Thanks, Jen. Joseph, and then we'll finish with Gugu.
Hi, I'm Joseph. I'm a developer from Las Vegas, Nevada, and I haven't really been doing anything with Backdrop in a while, so I'm just getting back into things.
Thanks, Joseph. Gugu?
Hi everyone, my name is Gogo and I'm just Gogo on the internet. So I'm a designer currently in Nigeria at the moment, and I'm joining Backdrop as a designer, contributing as a designer.
Awesome. Welcome, Gogu. All right. Great. Let's see. We usually do a little roundup of new contrib and community happenings. Jen, do you want to give us a little summary?
Sure. So we've had 4 new contrib releases in the last week. New modules, Auto Purge Users, which is a module that we're going to add on all the Backdrop sites. It's a port of a Drupal module that allows you to set requirements for like how long it can be if somebody's never logged into the website before their account gets deleted or blocked. And then for people who have been deleted or blocked, it'll delete those accounts in a period of time later as well, so that we can make sure that we have fewer spam accounts just sitting around waiting to be used later, which will be great. There's also the username module, which I think is also a port from Drupal. BW Panda has been working on Entity Plus CMI module, which is pretty cool. It allows you to save entity data into a configuration file. So if you wanted to use an entity to create a config schema, you could do something like that. It's the kind of thing where I'd never even thought that thing was possible. And of course, DocWoman's like, ta-da, look what I built. And in my mind's just like, what? It's really cool. So fun thought experiment. I can't wait to see how people use it. And then Avatar module, I think also ported from Drupal, also came out this week. So a lot of activity this week. Thank you, everybody who's been working on those.
Excellent. And when you say that purge users module, is that for, you said on Backdrop sites, you mean on backdropcms.org sites?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Great.
So we sort of have a bunch of people who are doing manual maintenance on spam accounts, but they've just been blocking them, and this will allow us to set up automatic rules for when those blocked accounts should be deleted, so we don't have accounts from 10 years ago that have been blocked for forever, and also some criteria around when an account should be blocked. So if it's been more than 3 months since you created your account, you've never logged in, for example, we could have something like that auto blocks, and then after a year of no use, we can delete or something like that. So we'll figure out what the rules are, but yeah, it's going to help keep our sites clean of users that might not be real people.
Great.
There was just a comment in Zulip that I think we got the credit wrong on that module. The RGPiano did the entity config one.
Oh, that was RGPiano. Oh, that's
Yep.
great. Yeah, thank you, RGPiano, for working on that.
RGPiano's watching on YouTube right now. So
Yeah, good to get that right.
Okay. All right. Let's see. We usually go to a forum post that we solicit questions throughout the week if people want to ask questions and have them answered during these meetings asynchronously. I wasn't here the past 2 weeks. Were there any questions from those 2 weeks that I missed?
No.
Okay.
Pretty quiet in the forum.
Okay. Well, speaking of RGPiano, probably the biggest 122 bug fix that we have for 122.1 is issue 5482 that RGPiano has been working on along with Doc Wilmot, and occasionally I've been hopping in there. Issue 5482, the layout relationship plugin that forms a relationship between a node and the author of that node is not working correctly. And there's been a pull request at 5482 that needs review. In testing this, yeah, pretty much the big thing is that we need to actually write a comment and test on GitHub itself, but I'll verbally say the state of it, that it needs review. The last time I looked at it, it worked great and it has excellent test coverage. The one thing I'm still trying to figure out is if we need to, we added a new property, the menu router, to the layout that is now like a permanent new property, which expands the complexity of the layout object when you debug it. And I'm trying to figure out if we could not pass in an extra property. I think it might be possible to work with the properties that we have already without adding anything new, but I could be wrong about that, and I need to go back and revisit it. I'm sure there's a technical reason for why we need to add it again, but I'm thinking, and this is not fully formed yet, is that the context information that we have is already in the layout already, and I'm just wondering why we need to have it in two places, both in the menu router and in the list of contexts that are in the object, the context property. So I don't know, that's what it's, maybe I shouldn't have talked about that, because layouts is just really heady, especially contexts. Well, anyway, that's kind of the holdup there, is that this is going to take some time to unravel if an alternative is possible. And I should state that as a comment, just so that Alejandro isn't just waiting. Anyway, I'll try to do that right after this meeting. Let's see, I don't have any other 122 items that are super pressing to me, but there might be some other ones out there. Let's go into 123. 123 is the next feature release of Backdrop that will be coming out September 15th. And there's a number of things that we're shooting for in that release so far. One thing came through this week that was unplanned, but came to completion, and that's issue 4521, which is really small, but it standardizes the spelling of email throughout Backdrop. So Backdrop was split occasionally using e-email or e-mail instead of email, all one word. You know, showing its age from Drupal, that e-mail was kind of the way email was spelled in the early days of the internet, and really hasn't been that way for the past decade or more. So anyway, that issue, BW Panda took the lead on it, and RGPiano followed up with a review. Thanks to both of you for making that happen. All right, let's see. Other features, the entity reference module, we're working on getting completed into 123. The issue number is 1301. This one has been stuck. Herbdool took the lead on it. He filed a pull request, and now there's this holdup where there's been 3 additional commits to the contrib project that we need to get integrated into the pull request for the core version. And the holdup here is just purely needing to jump through the hoops of regenerating the pull request while maintaining the entire Git history from contrib. I'm strongly tempted to simplify the process, because if we merge it into core as is, then it's a lot easier to pick the 3 commits into the core repository afterwards. So if that seems like it would be useful, then that's an approach that we could try to speed this process along. And that'll give us, like, sooner we get it in, the longer of a testing window we'll have to get it prepared for 123. Let's see. Next up is field group functionality, issue 647. Jen, I'm not sure if there's been any activity on this issue.
No update since last week. Essentially, we're in a bit of a holding pattern about trying to clean up some of the usability issues with it. And the one thing I'm thinking about doing is removing a feature, which is the ability to clone a field group from one entity to another one, or from one bundle to another one, while adding the field group. So if you wanted to have, for example, like a administrative information section on the edit form and on the display form, it's really convenient to be able to say build it on the edit form and then go to the display form and then say clone from edit form. But the current interface for doing that clone operation is a vertical tab on the add fields page, and the add fields page is already really complicated, and adding a vertical tab into that interface really clutters the interface and creates sort of an overwhelming experience. There is a follow-up issue that was recommended to have the field group be added on a standalone page. So that would be like adding an action link that says add new field group. When you click add new field group, you can go to a standalone page, and that could be a page where you could have the option to clone from another entity or another bundle or another view mode. I think that might be a better place for that feature than throwing it onto the fields form with all of the other field options. But doing that might also slippery slope into moving the add field settings onto its own standalone page, so we get two action links there, one that says add field and one that says add field group. And so I think trying to do all of this at once is just going to be a blocker for getting field group into core. So I think my first instinct would be add it to core without the clone functionality. Second one would be add back clone functionality, and you can do that in an action link. And then we can handle switching add field in a different way if we wanted to do that.
Yeah, I'm not sure how intensive this would be, but it would be helpful if we had an understanding of how many contrib projects modify the field form in the same way that field group does. Because if we build field group into core and field group is the only module that modifies that form in a really heavy way, then that kind of gives us the freedom to make further modifications without impacting contrib quite as much. But field group is a very popular module. It runs on like 1 out of every 8 backdrop websites or something like that. Like, fair percentage. And we can't heavily modify the field form if we're going to impact 1 out of every 8 backdrop sites. But if field group becomes part of core and we migrate its functionality into core, disable field group module, then that gives us a little bit more freedom to modify that form.
So it's the add field page, the manage fields listing, that is currently modified by field group. The field group is modifying it in the way that it used to be modified before we had a field API in core. So it's like residual code from like Drupal 5.
Oh my.
Where it form alters in its own form into a table. So I think that the way that other forms handle this now is a very different way than the way field group does it. So I'm not sure we should be using field group as like our example of how to do it or how we might want to do it. So I think kind of sort of holistically from like, if you were going to build this interface from scratch, how would you build it? Add field group section might be better than trying to see like how many other projects are doing it the way field group is doing it. But we do sort of have that question of like that managed fields listing has been around for a long time. It's not the best interface for that particular scenario. It got changed a little bit in Drupal 8 and Drupal 9. I'm not sure it's better, but it's different. We could ask people if they like one over the other and try and get some feedback on that. But yeah, I don't know.
I think really the only major change for the 888 and 9 was just moving the add a field to its own page.
Yeah.
So there's
Mhm.
less stuff just tacked onto the bottom of the field list.
Yeah, and that was the proposed solution for Backdrop as well.
I do know of one other module that modifies it in that page in a similar way, and that's Display Suite.
The managed fields page, or
Yeah.
okay, interesting.
Yeah,
just-
which it
it
still
adds
does.
it adds a whole ton of stuff down at the bottom of the field list.
Yeah, I think adding at the bottom of the field list is probably less terrible than what field group is doing, which is sort of jamming it into a row in the table. But yeah, there's also stuff at the bottom of the form of the field group. So
I've wanted for a long time to like redo basically all three of them, the field group and Display Suite, to have like a cohesive interface, but I just never had the time for that.
one thing that I was thinking is that if I had the ability to do this from scratch would be to change the way field UI worked to support settings that aren't related to a field. So you could have a settings form that wasn't tied to some field schema or something. And that might allow additional rows to be added into the table with configuration options that work the same way field configurations options work, but that wouldn't be saving that along with the way a field is configured. So it would allow configuration options that aren't field related to appear on the field managed fields form. So in this case, they'd be user interface related. With Display Suite, they could be layout related or wherever those end up affecting the end result. But that might be something we could brainstorm on to try and figure out how to make that system work for
you can
both.
You can use hook field extra fields to add not fields to your field UI.
Yeah, but there's no settings form for them.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah,
So
that
you'd have to tack those on yourself then.
Yeah,
that-
so that's what
and
I was thinking. If we changed that,
yeah. If hook field extra fields had options, it would really expand the way that form could be used, because you could start putting all kinds of things in there. You know, everything that's in vertical tabs right now, comment settings, menu settings. The title field, of course, is a popular thing that people want to be able to control. Yeah, that would really open things up quite a lot.
Yeah, I think one of the big features that Display Suite adds is the custom fields, and it's all done with that. And then Display Suite module itself manages its own settings separately.
Yeah. Well, anyway, yeah. Sounds like you've got a lot of work cut out for you, Jen.
there's a lot of slippery slopes. And I think without any specific feedback from people, my instinct would be just to remove the features that make it complicated and have that be the sort of MVP that gets in core, and then revisit all of the other stuff later with a more holistic approach. But that would mean that we would be removing that clone option, which is very common, that you want the same thing on your edit form and on your display form. And so I just wanted to, before I made that call, I wanted to allow people to be like, don't remove this feature, I need it. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Maybe if I do it, then people will start saying that.
All right. Great. Let's see. Let's move on. We've got only one more issue in 123 to discuss today, I think, and that's allowing the administrator to hide the title on comments, issue 4569, which Tim is the advocate for. There's 2 pull requests that have been filed. It looks like that we're waiting on feedback there to kind of determine which way is the best way and discuss how to minimize the backwards compatibility impact on existing themes. Tim, anything you? Sorry, I kind of took your summary, but is
No,
there
that's okay.
is there more to add there about the state of things?
No, it's just we're deciding which is the better approach. Changing the the comment template or doing it with CSS. I think we're fairly evenly split with a couple of people preferring CSS, a couple preferring the template, and a couple of people saying, well, either could work, but maybe with slight preferences. So one of the things we've been waiting for, or which I think would be helpful, would be clarity on whether both approaches are even acceptable. For example, I could see, Nate, where you might object to the CSS approach for the same reason some other people have, and in which case I don't need to keep pursuing it. So I'd kind of like some, before we push it any further, I'd just like a little guidance. If from a core committer's perspective, you have a strong opinion, that would be really helpful at this stage.
Yeah, first of all, I really appreciate that there's 2 pull requests that actually demonstrate the 2 options, so that we're not making assumptions about, what each option actually is. We're literally just talking about this pull request or that pull request, which is great.
I think there will be some fine tuning in either one once we pick which direction to go, but the broad outline is there. Yep.
Yeah, I think, let's see, where does the CSS one hide comment title? Where does this class actually get added? Okay, it gets added in a pre-process.
Yeah, and I think right now, if I recall, we're basically creating a second CSS file. And Jen, we have this other issue about how to make CSS changes to core, which if we address that, might help us avoid adding a new, or add it in a different way. But it would certainly, I can't, well, I guess the problem is that some themes also override some themes override the comment template, and many of them override the CSS as well. So we can't just modify the CSS theme or style sheet. So we basically add a new one just for this feature.
Yeah. I overall, like looking at these things, I think any solution is fine. I think we discussed this previously, that if we add a new setting and the new setting doesn't work on existing themes, I think that's totally fine, because it's a new feature. Themes have to go back and add support for something that wasn't there before. So the only thing we're really concerned about is existing sites. They're using a theme, and then they upgrade to the new version of Backdrop. The behavior should remain the same as it was before. And I believe that effectively both of these solutions pretty much provide that.
Sure, because neither of them take effect unless you check this box, right? To hide comments. Right now, it's not possible to hide comments, so nobody's done it. And the pull request adds the option to hide comments, which would be the default would be to not hide them. So there aren't any sites out there that have already chosen to hide comments, unless they're using a contrib module, which I don't. Actually, I don't know if we have to look at compatibility.
Yep.
Like, what if somebody already has the contrib module? Actually, do we have? Yeah, we do have the contrib module for background.
Yeah. We looked at that or talked about it 2 weeks ago. Last time Robert was here, because he's the maintainer of the contrib module, and it looks like there's only one set module, and you use the same name in the core setting, so it should be pretty easy to write an update script to, if you had the module on, turn it off. If you had the setting with one value, set the same value for core, and that's it. So the upgrade path should be pretty straightforward for the contrib module.
Yeah, but otherwise nobody has that setting, so it wouldn't affect any sites unless they had the contrib module. So.
Yep. So moving with that requirement that we not impact existing sites, and themes will need to update pretty much either way to support this new feature, regardless of whether it's a create a new CSS file or update the template file.
No.
And now I guess there are, depending on the choice we follow,
It's not the
themes
same.
may or
No.
may not need to update,
Right.
based on whether or not they overrode the template or they overrode the CSS or yeah.
Well, the idea of the CSS solution is that nobody would have to update anything. It would just work on all sites without, that's the advantage. That's why it's the only reason I'm really considering it. I mean, I think to some extent, the template seems like a really good solution, except that it would break a lot of themes, and the CSS solution doesn't. It works.
Well, let's say it wouldn't break a lot of themes. The new feature wouldn't work on a lot of themes. Is that
No, it
correct?
would work if you turn
The-
it on.
The CSS feature would, the template one wouldn't. The template one wouldn't work on a lot of themes because they have overridden it.
Yeah,
Right.
but that is assuming that the CSS file is in a file that hasn't been overridden, so it would be in a new
Right.
file. in order
That's
to
why we,
support
yeah,
that.
that's
Yeah.
why we created a new CSS file so that it wouldn't be overridden by any themes.
So the trade-off there is, hey, look, we found a way to distribute this new feature that will work for everyone, but it's going to create a little clutter in core. How do core maintainers feel about that? Whereas our other solution would be like, hey, we found a way to make it work, but if your theme has overridden the CSS file, it still won't work if we put it somewhere else. So
Yeah. Yeah. Great summary. I would, given those options, I would prefer the one that causes us, to have less baggage, because what if we add the new CSS file with the idea that ultimately we'd like to get rid of the CSS file and move towards an approach that's more like the alternative, we're basically just delaying when the break will happen. Break or needing to add support from Backdrop 1 to Backdrop 2 when we would ideally clean it up. But
So
I think
the two approaches are we can make it work or we don't care, we're not going to try. And if we choose with the we can make it work solution, then there are the two options of we can do it in a way that will always work, that creates clutter, or we can do it in a way that might not work if you've overridden the CSS file. And so I still think we have to choose between the we aren't even going to care approach and the we are going to care and we're going to try approach. And if we choose we're going to try, then we have to decide whether we want the clutter or not. So there's like a second option, a second choice to make.
yeah.
So-
Oh, go ahead, Joseph.
I'm just kind of throwing this out there, but it would be my preference. This is new CSS file in a module. It's not in a theme.
It would be in the comment module in core.
Okay. My preference would be to have more CSS files, not less.
Okay.
So basically, primarily the downside, I think, is just that we have more files. But I think as far as at a runtime, like someone viewing the page, we aggregate all that stuff anyway. So as far as the end user is concerned, there's not a new file. And then for overwriting it, then I would prefer to have each component named separately rather than if I overwrite the comment.css file, I don't want to lose everything. I just want to like overwrite one component.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see what you're saying. That more granular CSS files has some benefit.
Right.
The kind of iffy thing about this, though, is that as far as a component is concerned, this is like a very, very small piece because it's only the comment title, which you would normally think of as being part of the comment component. So it's not like a new component CSS file. It's unfortunately affecting a different component with a separate CSS file that is very, very small. So I'm not sure that the benefit is split the way that a front ender would really appreciate, because instead of, if you want to theme a comment now, you'd either remove this CSS file in your theme and put it all in comment.css, or you'd override both two CSS files just to have full control over the display of a comment.
Yeah, that's a good thought too for going forward. Like we're really focused on like the feature as it is right now, but like now if you're building a new theme, looking at the work you have to do to override a comment, if it's 2 files and then becomes 3 and then becomes 4, that's going to just be a real pain where it's still just one component still, where I want the components separated, but I don't want one component separated across multiple files. And if we set a precedent of do that or start doing that in general, just like, oh, we're adding a new feature, we're going to add a new CSS file, that could start to get really painful.
Well, I think especially in projects that use web components, they would have a title component, and then they would extend it to create a comment title component and then embed that in their comment component. But I don't know if we want to follow that design, but that's what I see in web component examples. So the comment title and the comment themselves would actually be separate components, even though one's embedded in the other.
Yeah, and that's kind of the weird thing about this is that if you're saying the template is the component, there's no corresponding, there's not 2 templates, each with a matching CSS file. There's one template that now has 2 CSS files, and that's not ideal.
Yeah. So, okay. First question, do we want to care and try and make this work for any site? Or do we just say, we don't care, we're not going to try? Because that's the first decision of, do we want to do it with CSS or do we want to do it in a template file?
And I feel like I've said this a lot of times, but there's an argument, right, that we can't expect for a new feature to work in all themes. But I just want to be really clear about the thing is there's going to be a button in core that a user can click and nothing's going to happen, right? So that's different. There are other features that might be there and the theme doesn't accommodate them, but it's not so obvious, right? There's not like a button that's clicked and nothing's happening, I think. I don't know of other examples like that. So, but anyways, but we could, I mean, my feeling is if we do go this route, I want to think about a subtle way. There's been some opposition to this, but I'd like a subtle way to at least alert people why that might not be working. As opposed to just having it not work. So that would be my sort of intermediate position.
Yeah, and policy-wise, Jen, I think my preference there is like if it's possible to make, add a new feature and also not impact existing sites and have that new feature work, then absolutely that should be the way that we go. But this is an issue in which achieving that is not straightforward. And we don't actually, I mean, there's substantial downsides, or maybe not substantial, but there are downsides to attempting it because we're like creating baggage and cruft.
Well, no, that's the second decision.
Oh, okay.
Right,
well,
so the first one is, do we want to try? And it looks like maybe we can't get 100% of the way there, right?
Yeah, I think do we want to try is yes.
Yeah.
But do we make that a requirement? No.
Yeah, okay. So then if the answer is we want to try, then I think we're going to need to go with one of the CSS approaches. And then the next question is, where do we put this? And that's a little bit more complicated because right now the pull request is putting it in a separate style sheet, which it sounds like is not preferable. But there are a bunch of other places we can put it too. And we should revisit our other issue, which is why it gets more complicated, for how to make CSS changes to existing sites. So we have this conditional CSS selector option that I think is currently the preferred one, where if this were to go into Backdrop 23, we would get 123, we would get like a body class that's like Backdrop 123. And then in the CSS file, we could put it in comment.css. It would be like body.123. If you have this specific thing, do this thing here. And that way any site before 123 wouldn't be affected. Any site that was installed before 123 might not be affected. We have another question to answer on that one. But it does also then say, okay, well, if your theme has overridden the CSS file, you're not going to get the feature, right? Because that's only going to go into the core CSS file. And then if you've chosen to configure your site not to get this class, even if you are running the core CSS file, you're still not going to get the change. So and I think all of these other decisions also need to be made at some point, but now we're sort of lumping them into like this issue as well, as to where the CSS goes.
Yeah, I think also you're interpreting my we want to try as a different level of effort than what I'm thinking. Because what I'm looking at is we've already tried and there are difficulties about making it work in existing themes. And so although that would be preferred, it's not easy. And so
We shouldn't try.
we shouldn't
We
try.
shouldn't
Or
include anything that
yeah,
would try.
we've already tried and we found it difficult. So in this case, we shouldn't worry about adding compatibility to existing themes. It should just
Huh.
require the change.
Interesting. So I thought that was definitely the opposite of what you were saying. You were saying don't even bother with the PHP approach, only go with CSS. But you're like, no, we looked at CSS. It's hard. Go to PHP.
Yep, that's exactly what I'm saying. That
Huh.
yeah, that we want to try, but it's not a requirement, and we tried, and it was difficult. So therefore, we should say, okay, this isn't required for this.
Interesting. Yeah, I would consider we haven't tried yet because we haven't answered those other questions. But I think there's a different level of effort there
Yeah.
where it's like we've
Yeah.
proven it's possible. We haven't, like, our proof of concept works, but we haven't figured out implementation details, was where I'm at. But you're like, don't even try implementation details because it's complicated.
Right, and
So-
and there's lots of I mean, yeah, I think that I mean, this isn't really setting precedent because we've done this sort of thing in the past already. It's like when you add a new feature, sometimes themes need to put in extra work to support that feature, and this
Yeah.
is a case of that happening. And so I think we could probably, if we dug up, find some other examples of really similar things that we've added features that themes don't support that they need to go back and add.
Like the layout on the homepage that we just did.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's
Right?
actually a pretty good
Like,
example.
yeah.
Yeah, a pretty good example. Yep.
Yeah.
Well,
Although
But
I-
that is different. Like in Tim's point there is that there's not a checkbox that won't work.
Right.
It's just gonna
Exactly.
everything's gonna display on the page and it's not gonna be as pretty. It's not like a feature that like does like you're like my site's broken is the experience you get with the button that doesn't work.
That's the difference I
Also
see, is that, well, it may not support old themes. It's sort of obvious. And, if you apply that theme, it just doesn't work. And it's obvious, okay, this theme doesn't work with that. My concern is that as a user, I pick a theme and I pick core, I see an option, I click on it, it doesn't work. I don't know that the theme is the problem. There's no way for me to know that. So I think core is broken. And I spend a half hour trying to figure out why this thing isn't working because I don't understand that the theme just doesn't support it. That's different than like it just looking bad in the theme and me realizing, oh, well, I can't use this theme with that thing. So
Yeah, I do think that's hard to explain in checkbox description text or something. Like how would you make that apparent?
Yeah. What? I mean, this is getting into, straight
Details.
like blue sky brainstorming possibly, but theme files, theme.info files have been used, it could be used to identify whether or not they support certain features, like color module support, right? But I don't particularly like that option because we would need to default it to not
No
supporting
support.
hiding comment titles when I think what should happen is that contrib themes should go back and add support for it. And if we hide it by default, then instead contrib themes may just, all new themes moving forward would not have that option on by default. And then they wouldn't support it like as new themes come out, which is not ideal either.
right. So there is a list of all the themes. I mean, like the majority of themes are affected by this. On the other hand, we've a number of committers who I think would update, right? But there's some themes that will never get updated, but they're also probably relatively infrequently used. I don't know. You can look at the list and judge for yourself, but I included a list in there of all the themes, and the ones with the little X's are the ones that will be affected by this. They won't work, and it's most of them. It's like 2/3 of them. So we can make a concerted effort to try and get everybody, again, most people to update their themes.
Well, I guess in in summary, I like the
Mhm.
template approach. Like if you're asking for my opinion on which
Yeah.
way to go, the template approach would be preferred for me, because I think that that is more the way that we would write it if we were starting without any concern from the past. And I think, we tried to address it, and we acknowledged the cost, and we've, said that it's acceptable.
Okay. I'm okay with that. I was leaning the other way, but I'm okay with that.
Yeah, same. I
And
was also leaning the other way,
we'll try to,
but
I will try to figure out some steps to mitigate the impact as much as I can, and I'll think more about that as we try to implement it. Yeah.
Yeah, here's another idea. I don't know.
Some,
Potentially, like the info file to like designate whether or not a theme supports a certain feature or not. That's a precedent. It's already there. Rather than defaulting all new themes to having that option off, we could default it to being on. And if a theme didn't want to do the work of updating its template files or didn't want to have that feature, then it could specify its info file that that is not a valid option for it. And updating the theme then would be adding a line in the info file saying, I don't support this feature. And then it would hide the field.
yeah, but if you have a theme that's not getting updated, it's not going to get
Yeah.
its info file updated either.
Totally. I'm just like throwing it out there as like an option for theme
Yeah.
authors if they don't want to support the feature or it's a lot of work. There's be an easier option than retrofitting their theme. Just like hide the option.
That could also be a good job for Bug Squad.
Oh yeah,
Right.
to just go through and just do it. Yeah.
Well, and
That sounds-
I could push that a little bit further, which is we could get all themes to support this if we just went through and submitted and applied pull requests to some of these inactive themes.
That's
Also
that's
true.
that's
a
true.
good Bug Squad job also.
Right, and which I've kind of hadn't considered that as even a possibility. But I think that half the themes that need it would probably get this fixed, and there might be half that don't. The fix wouldn't be that hard. A lot of those are unmaintained themes. So if we could just go in and fix it on them, then that would mitigate this problem. But I don't know what the policy is there, and if that's the kind of thing we want to get into.
Yeah, it starts getting pretty. I think that would get really, pretty difficult pretty quickly because themes are all about the aesthetic, and the way that they present, and we'd have to make some assumptions about when the title is hidden, what does it look like? Yeah. Which
Well, yeah, I suppose that's true. Although, yeah, I mean, I think it's a pretty minor aesthetic decision, and if the theme's unsupported, it would be better to fix it than to make that small assumption. So, and we might even be able to do it. One option would be, well, okay, maybe your option is just to make it clear that we're not supporting it in that theme, rather than trying to fix it. But I'll shut up. Joseph?
Some of, I am not volunteering. Some
Yep.
of these ideas sound like they are trending toward feature detection for themes like Underscore provides in browsers.
Okay.
interesting. Yeah.
Like we're building feature detection for one component, and then I would be worried with some of these that the trend would be toward having complete feature detection for features that we add, so that we can just tell if a theme supports it or not.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. We're not proposing feature detection right now. We're talking about feature declaration. Does this,
Right.
asking the theme, do you support this or not? But that's I don't know, kind of an interesting thought experiment. Like, could we detect if a theme supported it or not, and then automatically adjust the field based on what it appeared the theme supported?
Right. If we had,
Yeah, you could like scrape the template file and check to see like if hidden title, that if the variable is present, and
like
it's
if
like,
it
oh
has
yes,
a, if it has a title, template or a CSS file with a particular name, or if it targets a CSS class with a particular name or something like that.
Yeah. That suggestion did come up. Attila Vasa suggested, can we do that? And I think some of us weren't sure if that would even be possible. So, I mean, I guess it's possible, but
Yeah, it sets a really
Yeah.
weird precedent,
Yeah.
like I really don't like that kind of magical functionality where you haven't done something explicitly, you did
Mhm.
something that could potentially, have done something weird. Like if you changed your variable names like in preprocess or pre-assembled stuff in preprocess, then it wouldn't, the things we're looking for, the detection wouldn't be what we thought it would be. I could see
Mhm.
that going wrong pretty easily. Yeah. Well, yeah, I think maybe for today we might close that
Okay.
discussion.
Yep.
I don't actually have a next topic, but I thought I'd leave a couple of minutes in case there is anything else that we'd like to discuss. No? Okay.
Related to the field group thing that we were discussing earlier, Jen, did you see the project on the Backdrop Issues repository for Field UI?
No.
Okay.
I think I did. I'm not sure I've
Okay.
used it. I've seen it.
I was messing around with the projects feature a while back, and I made one for Field UI, and every time I find an issue related to the Field UI, I throw it in there.
Great.
So
I think I saw it in the list, but I haven't looked at it.
it might
Okay.
be, if you want to just break out like the field group thing and
Yeah.
have follow-up issues, so you could just throw them all in there, and then we can find them
Okay. I've
easily.
got 2. I'll definitely add them. Also, I just tested the latest pull request for layout context, and it is not working for me. So I don't know what that means.
Okay. Yeah, maybe requesting steps to like how to test it. It does have test coverage, but I don't know. Sometimes the tests get written and the tests pass because they're not actually testing correctly. So that is a possibility.
I just set up a node layout and added the author relationship.
Is Jen available for anybody else? She kind of froze on me.
No, she froze for me too.
Okay, we missed
Sorry.
that, Jen. You added a
My-
node layout and then something.
And then added a field from the author layout, and then I added the same field from the current.
I'm laughing
Okay,
because
again.
right as you keep explaining, it keeps freezing. Yeah, you're good now. You want to try again?
So I'm gonna write an issue, a common issue, but putting a block that displays a field from the node authors, from the node author on the node template does not load any content from the field. So it could be a field problem rather than a context problem, but it does load that data from the currently logged in user, which
Yeah.
makes me think it's a context problem.
Yeah, that's the
So
existing
I'll just
problem.
drop a link.
Yeah. Okay.
That's what this is fixing,
Um,
right?
That's what that should be fixing.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought maybe there was a different problem and I was missing it. Okay.
No. Yeah, that's the problem. Is that it uses the current user instead of the referenced user.
Oh, well, here now it uses no
off of
user.
the node.
I put
Okay,
one in
but-
and said use the current user, and I put another one and said use the author, and the current user works and the author does not.
Hmm.
So it doesn't load the wrong one; it loads nothing. But
Oh, okay. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Okay. Well, yeah, that it is. It should be working after that pull request for sure.
okay,
Okay, well, let's wrap up for today. We're at the top of the hour. Thanks so much, folks, for being here and the good discussion about, compatibility and what to do with that comment title. Yeah, I hope that gives us a way forward. Okay,
Thank you.
well, let's close for today. Thank you
Okay.
so much.
welcome back, Joseph.